And here we go. Okay, so like I said, I am Susie Bills. I'm the president of LDS PMA. And just a couple of announcements. As I mentioned before, if you are interested in helping arrange educational opportunities for LDS PMA, please let me know. We would love to have some help. And we'd also just like to know what topics you're interested in discussing every month. So again, feel free to send us, email me, or to email just our LDS PMA email address, and we would love to get your input, feedback, and help. So today's roundtable session is going to be led by Scarlett Lyndsey, and she's going to be talking about her experience editing textbooks, working with textbook publishers, how she got into that, some tips, best tips, things to avoid. And just I'll let Scarlett introduce herself a little bit more, but she currently is the editing manager or managing editor at the Faculty Publishing Service for BYU. And she's actually, I work with her through that, and she has great project management experience. She works a lot. It's true. You're welcome. She works on all types of academic materials. She's worked on other materials as well. And she just has great information, and that's why I asked her to speak today. So Scarlett, I just wanted to introduce yourself a little bit more and then go ahead and get into the discussion. And everybody, feel free to ask questions during the session. This is meant to be discussion, so just chime in when you have a question or have some input to give, and we'll turn it over to Scarlett.
Okay, thanks, Susie. Let me know if you have problems hearing me, because I sometimes talk quietly. So, but thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to participate today. I'm excited to talk about it with you guys, and I would love any kind of feedback or additional information, because I feel like I have a lot to learn about this still. So I guess I'll just kind of introduce myself. I started editing when I was an English major at BYU, and that was quite a while ago. And I edited in school, and I did some work for the Journal of Mormon History and a couple other local like publishers. But I got most of my experience when I moved to New York City and got a job at Pearson in their higher education division. I worked in the production department. So I started off as an assistant, and by the time I left, I was basically a production editor. I was there for 8 years. So I learned a lot about book production and also just about textbooks in general. I was working on the English and political science textbooks. So it was a great experience. I loved it, and I was sad to leave, but I had twins, so I decided to stay home with them. And then we moved back to Utah and a couple years ago, and that's when I started freelancing full-time. And just mostly because of the connections I had from my textbook, my work in the industry, I was able to get some work, but that's not the only way I've gotten work. So, but I've been mostly working for educational publishers. So I know that not everyone can get their start in-house at a publishing company, although that's a great way to get started. But I feel like the two most helpful ways that I've been able to get work in this with educational publishers is through Editorial Freelancers Association, EFA. You guys might already be members of that, and through LinkedIn. So I know that there's other associations out there. Of course, there's LDS PMA, but I personally have only really been very active in the EFA. So EFA is super helpful because of their email list. That's a great way to not only find out about educational publishers that might be out there, but also just to connect with people, other editors that might have connections that can help you get work. They also have a freelancers directory where you can make a profile. And if you have a strong profile and it emphasizes anything that has to do with educational publishing, or even just kind of mentions that you want to be involved in that, I know that a lot of publishers do look through the directory and do searches. I got one job last year that paid really well. It was for a small publisher. They published books for teachers. EFA is also a great way a place to take classes, and not only are you learning stuff that will help you, you're also connecting with the teacher, who is usually, a professional that has connections, and you get to know the students who can also be part of your network. So classes are really good ways to get to know people. EFA also has a job board, and I will just have to say, I think there's so much competition because there's so many editors trying to get the same job. So you don't always get the jobs if you apply through the job board, but I think I have found that it's good to just keep track or kind of pay attention to what jobs are being posted, because sometimes you'll see like, oh, there's this one company that keeps looking for work, and they're or looking for editors, and they're an educational publisher. So you can kind of think, oh, well, maybe I could contact them on my own. So I think that's a great resource. And I have also found that a lot of educational publishers are on LinkedIn, and they do try to find people through LinkedIn. I've had it's for an e-learning company, so it's not exactly textbooks, but I'm editing their marketing materials, but it's kind of all similar educational stuff. So that's been good. So other than those two, I think it's kind of similar to getting work with in other areas of editing. You can follow organizations and publishers on social media. You could even sign up for daily job emails from places like Indeed. There's online discussion boards, and you can sign up for email lists. Like I just found out about one called Copy Editing L. It's probably been around forever, and you guys probably already know about it, but you just can get emails from discussions from different editors, and that's a way to connect with people. I would also say that if you have the time and the money, you could consider getting an editing certificate. I got one when I was in New York, and I already had a full-time job, so I didn't really take advantage of the networking opportunities that it offered. But when I think back to it, I realized that there were so many people there working for so many different publishers. It would have been a really great resource for networking. And so I think it's kind of like taking classes. It's a good way to get to know people and get the word out that you'd like to work for educational publishers. And of course, you can always research companies that you're interested in, try to find the production manager and just send them your resume cold, or call them, cold calls. That's probably the least effective way, but you never know. I think it's probably still a good way to get your name out there. I know that when I worked at Pearson, we'd get resumes every once in a while, and we kept them in a file in case we needed them. So I think it would probably be worth it to try that too. So I don't know if you guys have questions about any of that.
Scarlett, did you say it was the production manager that you reached out to with your resume?
Yeah, that's, at least in my experience, it's the production managers that are hiring the freelance copy editors.
Okay, great. Now, are you also going to touch on freelance writing, or is this for editing?
I think the email that went out, it did say it was writing, but I really only have experience with editing. So
okay,
sorry.
Would it be the same? Oh, that's okay. Would it be the same process? Do you think?
I think so. I think all of the ways I just went over to kind of get work as an editor, you could also apply it to work as a writer.
Okay.
If this is Susie, if I can just chime in really quick. Often it is, so they will work with writers to do sometimes the textbooks, but sometimes more of like their supplementary materials, their online course management systems. And so They will, it's again on a freelance basis. And so if you contact project editors, the project editor will know what's coming up and what they need the content writers help on. And so it'll be pretty similar process.
Okay, would it help then to have a, not a profile, I can't think, I'm sorry, the portfolio of published work or something like that that they could refer to?
Yeah, I'm sure that would help a lot. Or if you had a website, or I think you can even put stuff like that on LinkedIn.
Oh, okay.
Is there anything else? I guess I'll just move on. I just wanted to talk for a minute about publishers versus book packagers. Book packagers are like separate companies that are like production houses that publishers will often kind of farm out their production work to these packagers. So the production or the publishing company will send their manuscript to the book packager, who will take care of all of the production, and then they'll send back the final files to the publisher. So I don't know how long this has been happening. I know that when I worked at Pearson, we worked with these vendors. We did some projects in-house, but most of the projects were sent to book packagers. So it's kind of the same thing though, because there are production managers and production editors that work for the book packagers, and you can also find them kind of in the same places on LinkedIn. They also are kind of looking for editors on EFA. So the main difference is that working with them is that the book packagers are kind of like the middlemen. They hire the freelancers, but they're being paid by the publisher. So one drawback of that is that they often pay less, but to be honest, I feel like the publishers don't pay that much more. So, but there is, like, they take a cut of the copy editing budget. But like I said, I haven't personally noticed that much difference. They can be, I don't know if they're a little bit more, some people say they're more difficult to work with. That hasn't necessarily been my experience, but I know there's some mixed feelings among editors about working with the book packagers, but honestly, I just feel like a lot of publishers use them, so I don't know how easy it would be to avoid using them or working with them. And like I said, I feel like I've had decent experience working with them. One good thing about working with the packagers is that they are busy with lots of different projects from different publishers. So once you get in with them and get on their freelancers list, they will send you repeat work. And you can also get a chance to edit books from different publishers because they work with different publishers, and kind of a variety of subjects. So, and even if maybe they pay a little bit less or maybe are a little bit more of a pain to work with, you know, it's a great way to get experience under your belt and get started. And once, you know, of course, once you have more experience, you can look for, you know, better clients or better paying work. So, and many of these packagers, they do pay by the page, which I think sometimes it can be good and bad. If it's a lower per page rate, you just want to make sure that you're working, you know, at a fast enough pace that you're not getting like $6 an hour for your work or something. So just have to be kind of mindful of that. I've also worked with a couple production or packagers that are based in India or that have offices in India, and that's kind of a whole nother, I don't know, it's a whole different situation. I feel like they're fine to work with, but there can be some communications issues, and the time difference is so different. They're emailing you in the middle of the night, so you can't get really you know, an immediate response if you have a question. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I, for the most part, have had an okay experience working with people in India. And just keep in mind, most, if not all, I think probably all publishers and packagers require you to take an editing test, but it's usually not a big deal. They just send you a few pages of a manuscript, and then you edit it as you normally would and send it back. And then they'll let you know if you passed. Or actually, one of the packagers had this editing expert that they hired to review the tests. And then she sent back feedback that I got, which was interesting, but I don't think they all do that. But it's just something to be aware of, that you have to take an editing test. And on the EFA email list, one of the editors recently sent out like a big list of packagers. And I asked for her permission to distribute that to you guys. So I'm hoping to, I don't know what the best way would be to send that out, but I'm going to send you a list. I mean, there's a bunch. So it'll be just good for you if you want to look into some of them and see if there's any that you'd be interested in working with.
Yeah, Scarlett.
Great.
Again, if any of you want the list, if you'll just email us, it's our email address, info, the LDS PMA. Actually, let me slow that down. So it's info.ldspma@gmail.com. And I'll also put that into the chat box on Zoom. But if you want that, if you'll just email us and let us know that you're interested, then we can send that to you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so I guess if you don't have any other questions about that, I just have to say too, like, I think I've had a good experiences working both with publishers and packagers. So I don't think there's a huge difference. Maybe there used to be, but I've had kind of similar experiences with both. Just, I feel like in general, people who are working in publishing are very nice people. And so, and they're very helpful. So I think you'll have a good experience either way. I thought it would be helpful to talk about maybe some skills that you might want to work on building if you're interested in working with textbooks. Because I think it is different than working, well, it's kind of obviously different than working maybe with an independent author or a graduate student or, you know, something like that. Because when you're working for a textbook publisher, you're kind of, as a copy editor or proofreader, you're part of the larger production process, which in, you know, these big publishing companies is this big kind of process. So it's good to know about that and, you know, typical kind of book production terminology, like, especially because the production editor will just be throwing these terms around because that's what they're used to saying, you know, talking about the recto pages or the front matter or the, you know, running heads. So I know that that's pretty basic stuff, and you can learn a lot about that just by reading Chicago or the Copy Editor's Handbook by Einstein. I know that this is very common for copy editors, but this has really good information in it about just the parts of a book. So I think it's good to be familiar with that. Also have a book called, I don't know if you've heard of this one. It's been around for a long time, but Bookmaking by Marshall Lee. This is more for production editors. So I don't know if I would tell you to buy it, but if you could check it out from the library, it just would be a good overview of the production process. And you can get familiar with some of the things to watch out for if you're a proofreader, some of the lingo maybe you'd hear if you were working with a textbook publisher. And then another thing I was thinking that would be good to get familiar with is just kind of the structure of a textbook and some of the common elements in textbooks, because textbooks can have, well, they do have more complex designs and more like, yeah, design elements than kind of just a typical book. So
now, are you talking? I'm sorry, pardon me. So are these textbooks for elementary, through college? Is there a certain level, or is this pretty standard for everything, do you think? Or?
I am most familiar with like college level, upper level textbooks, but I know that for K through 12, it's probably like similar. I think textbooks just are generally, have a more complex design just because they're trying to help readers learn concepts. And so they have different ways of summarizing things or kind of describing the learning objectives and stuff like that. So I think it would apply to any level of textbooks. But I actually have a textbook here. I was just going to briefly just want to show you. I'm proofreading this is the 4th edition. I'm proofreading the 5th edition, but I just wanted to kind of show you some of the really quick, like, it's just, there's just a lot of different elements to be familiar with. Like, there's usually a chapter introduction, there's, you know, a chapter outline. Then they always have kind of these very, these headings that are very much easy to follow. They've got a lot of images and tables and figures. They've got like marginal information. I don't know if you can see that, but so there's a lot of different elements. So I was just thinking that if you had a chance to go to a bookstore or a library, or even look, if you have, you know, nieces and nephews or kids that have textbooks, just maybe flip through a textbook and kind of get familiar with, you know, some of the elements that are in them. Just so that if you do get, you know, a job editing a textbook or, you know, more academic book, you could say, oh, okay, I know what they're talking about when they're talking about a box, you know, because I've seen, I don't know if I have an example of a box, but, you know, just whatever element that you might come across, you're kind of familiar with that already. Also, since I really only have edited for like soft sciences and humanities, so mostly we use Chicago and APA style, which I'm sure you guys are already familiar with, but it's just good to have a solid knowledge of those styles, because I think, at least for what I've edited, those are the more common styles. And then working with style sheets is also a good thing to be familiar with. Here, this is a style sheet from another one of my projects. It's pretty long. It's like 8 pages. So it depends on just how big the project is, but every project you get will have a style sheet that you either add to or you'll have to create it. A lot of times you'll get a template for the style sheet, but it's just good to be familiar with what a style sheet is, how to work with one. And Chicago and Copy Editor's Handbook both talk about that. Another thing I thought would be helpful to learn, if you're not already familiar with, is editing PDFs. And because with textbook publishers, I think like one of their main goals is to publish a textbook that is successful enough that they can just keep publishing editions of it forever. So most of the textbooks that I edit are not the first edition. They're usually like 4th edition, 10th edition. So to save money, the publishers will do or we used to call it tear sheet manuscripts. I don't know if they'll still call it that, but basically it's a PDF of the proofs, the final proofs from the previous edition. They'll send the PDF to the author, and then the author will mark it up with the PDF editing tools. So she'll, you know, add a new sentence or change a word here or there. And then if there are bigger sections of the text that they want to replace, they'll type it up in a Word document and you'll edit that. So I'm actually editing a political science book right now where they're updating it for the midterm elections. So I don't have to read the whole PDF, thank goodness. I'm just reading the new material. But you'll have to know how to work with a PDF and the editing tools. And there's a lot of resources online. And again, I'm sure that you guys already have experience with this, but if you don't, there's tutorials online. EFA has a class on marking up PDFs. There's blog posts you can read. So yeah, that's just a good thing to know. I also just wanted to mention proofreading. Proofreading, I feel like with textbook publishers, you can get some repeat work if you're a good proofreader. Unfortunately, it pays a little bit less than copy editing, which I don't think that's fair, because I feel like you have to have kind of a different skill set to be a proofreader, and but it doesn't usually pay that much less. But I feel like there's probably more copy editors out there than proofreaders, so it might be something to look into. So for proofreading, there's classes available, obviously. And one book that I really like, and you might have seen this already, is Mark My Words by Peggy Smith. It was published, I'm not sure how long ago. but I feel like a lot of the information is still really valuable, and I refer to it a lot when I proofread. And so this is a helpful book that you might want to check out. Knowing the kind of traditional proofreader's marks is really helpful. I still edit or proofread on paper, so I'm making my little editing signs. PDF editing, of course. I think probably the majority of proofreading is on PDF now. And then just being familiar with kind of the layout and typography basics of like page design is helpful. And once again, I think that's where this bookmaking book would come in handy. Chicago also has information, but just stuff like what to look for when you're proofreading, like, uneven spreads or tight lines or widows and orphans, things like that. So I feel like if you're interested in proofreading, that's a great place to get work because there is proofreading work out there. And like I said, with textbooks, it is a more complicated design, so they need good proofreaders to catch problems with the pages. Another thing I thought you could get familiar with is type coding. I don't know how familiar with you guys are with this. It's like when each element of a manuscript, like the headings, the text, any kind of keywords or figures, boxes, things like that, each element is identified by a tag, like an opening and closing tag, and it's like a little code. So like a first level heading, the tag would be H1. So sometimes publishers will ask you to add these tags in throughout the manuscript. And sometimes they'll already be there and you just have to make sure that they look okay. And Chicago and the Copy Editor's Handbook both talk about type coding, so you could read about it there. There's also a lot of information online. A lot of the publishers use XML coding, which I did a Google search, and there's a lot of information on XML coding. So I feel like that could be a whole training session, and I'm not really an expert on it, but just something to keep in mind that you might want to learn a little bit more about. But if you got a job that required coding, I'm sure the PE, the production editor, would offer help and instructions if you needed it. And I also just noticed the other day that on the EFA website, they've got like a pre-recorded webinar on copy editing within the educational publishing industry. So I'm planning on taking that. I think if you're an EFA member, that would be a great thing to look into. I think it's like $60 or something. So it might be worth it just to learn a little bit more. I'm sure they have other things that I missed in that. So I don't know if you have any questions about skills or things that you might want to learn about.
Scarlett, this is Susie. If I can just mention, so I don't know if any of you else are familiar with XML, but just Scarlett, do you want to just give the basic explanation of XML, or I can just.
I'll let you do it, Susie, because you might know more. I mean, I know how it basically works, and I can add the tags, but I don't have like a super in-depth.
Okay. Yeah. So XML, if you're familiar with HTML coding, just basically web coding, then it's similar to that. So there's a code. Basically, there's a code before and after whatever text you want to have a certain attribute. So if you want to be italics, you're going to have the brackets before and after a title that you want italics. And so that's similar with XML. You're just putting code around different words, phrases, paragraphs, and putting that code around them will give them a certain attribute. Or it might just give them saying, it might just be that, okay, this is the attribute of a paragraph. And so everything has a style assigned to it. And so it helps when the content is in a database, and then it can be searched in certain ways, and it will be, you can pull up different information by searching for different things. And so it's a way to give things formatting, but it's also a way to organize content, especially when it's making it searchable for different uses. And so that's the kind of the use for it, but it's really pretty simple. I have found that most of the things you'd be doing applying XML to, it's really pretty straightforward. And so I would say definitely it's something that you can learn, and don't feel that it would be too daunting of a process to learn how to do basic XML. You could just go, like Scarlett said, there's a lot on the internet and there are lots of tutorials, and if you just go through one, you get the basic idea, and then if they ask you, okay, can you do XML, then you have the idea of, yeah, I know I can handle that.
Yeah, and I would say it's pretty easy to figure out. I mean, a lot of times they'll give you a list of their codes that they use. And so if you can figure out, and which you can, what the different elements are, you can just add the tags. And so yeah, it's not too complicated. Okay. I was also, okay, well, I'm just going to go forward. I was just going to talk about pitfalls to avoid and some best practices to implement to have a good experience. Some of the pitfalls that you want to avoid is, I was just going to say that if you're approached by a publisher or packager online, or on LinkedIn or something, and they ask you about working for them, I would just take a little while to research them, make sure that they're a good company to work for. I have never had a problem with shady companies, but I've seen people talking about it on the EFA email list. I think it's just worth a few minutes to Google them, check out their website, make sure that they're like a legit company. And again, the EFA is a good resource because you can even send out an email to say, hey, I got approached by XYZ company. Has anyone worked with them before? What do you think? So that's, it's a good place to check that out. I think as with any freelance job, don't commit to it or give an estimate until you've seen the manuscript. And when they're big projects like a textbook, you'll probably just get a sample chapter, but it'll give you an idea of kind of what you're in for. So if they don't offer you a sample, I would definitely ask for a sample before you give them an estimate or say that you'll do it. And also just be clear about the project schedule before you commit to the job. Kind of try to figure out, how many pages a week am I going to have to do to get this done in time? And so, sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out, but if you just try to think about it a little bit, 'cause I've just learned this the hard way, because if it's a big project, it can end up taking up a big chunk of your day or a big chunk of, your schedule, and it can go on for months. So you want to just be really clear about the schedule and how long it's going to take, as clear as you can be before you accept it. And also just make sure that the pay they're offering is worth it. Like I mentioned, if it's really low, if the per page rate is really low, like $2.50 a page or something, and it looks like it's going to take a long time to, it looks like you're going to be able to work like 5 pages an hour because it's heavier edit, then your per hour rate is really low. So just want to try to just make sure that you're getting paid an acceptable rate for you. Because like I mentioned before, sometimes educational publishers don't pay on the high end of the editorial rates. They're usually paying a little bit lower.
Scarlett?
Uh-huh.
Are you ever able to negotiate rates? Have you ever tried doing that?
I have never tried, and it might just be because of my background. I know that where I worked, the copy editing budget was already set, and there wasn't much I could do. But I think that if you got a job and it looked like it was going to be more work than what they're saying, definitely go back to the project editor and say, well, based on what I'm looking at here, I think this is going to take me a lot longer than what you're offering. And I definitely bring that up. Like, I wouldn't just accept it if it doesn't look right,
Great.
And then I think I would just say, always ask questions. Once you get the job, if you have any questions, don't be embarrassed, or don't be afraid to just ask the production editor about, anything, because they'll appreciate it if you can get things straight. They don't want you to be doing something wrong on accident because you didn't ask a question. So, and then when you send back the project or a batch of chapters or whatever it is, always just send a note to the production editor if there's something they need to be aware of, any problems that you see that might crop up, or issues that they might want to bring up with the author. Because I didn't mention this before, but when you're working for these companies, you're rarely working or in contact with the author. There's always the production editor is kind of the go-between. So if you have a query for the author, or if you want to bring something up, bring that up with the production editor, and they can check on that with the author or with the editorial department. Sometimes they're not even in contact with the author, it's the editorial department, depending on how big the company is. And then I just wanted to say about invoicing. Sometimes these projects can go on for a long time. If it's a big book, it can be over several months. And so you want to ask the project editor about invoicing, because I mean, if you're able to just wait for 6 months to get paid, that's fine. You can just bill at the end of the project. But if you'd like to get paid a little bit sooner, you can say can I invoice once a month, or how does that work? And sometimes I've had a client say, oh, well, we can only do 2 invoices per project. And so, okay. But anyway, it's good to just check on that so that you're not 5 months into the job and being like, geez, it would be nice to have some money. So, I don't know if you have any questions about any of that, pitfalls to avoid. Some of the best practices that you can implement to maintain good relationships is, I would say the number one thing is to just be very mindful of the schedules. Just from my experience as being a production editor, we would spend a lot of time kind of coming up with these really complex schedules for the whole production cycle. So, and everything was sort of interconnected. And the main goal was to reach this printer date, or if it's an e-product, the launch date. And especially if it's a printer date, if we missed the printer date, it was a huge problem, because they schedule the printer date months in advance, and then the printer fills up. And if we miss the date, we have to wait a month, and then the sales goals are not met, and it's a whole big thing. So basically, it's really, really important to send in your work when on the deadline or before. Even if you feel like it's not perfect, just do your best and get it done on time. I mean, of course, you can always bring it up with your production editor if there's an emergency, or if there's a reason why you can't get it done in time, but I would just bring it up as soon as you can so that they can figure something out. They'll really appreciate that. Now, at the same time, I think it helps to be flexible. If they ask for a quick turnaround and you're able to do it, they'll be happy that you can do a quick turnaround. On the other hand, there are some projects that just stretch on. I'm proofreading a psychology textbook that's a first edition, and I've proofread the first 7 chapters, but the next chapter, they said, it was a month between the chapters, and I still haven't gotten it yet. I need to follow up with it. But so there are some projects where you just I don't know when the next chapter is coming in. So you have to be a little bit flexible. And I guess that would be a good reason to try to have more than one client, because if your work doesn't come in for a while, it's always nice to be working on some other projects. Obviously, if you're getting paid hourly, keep track of your time really carefully. There's a lot of ways to do that. I think you'd probably be familiar with them. There's Toggle, and I know there's other apps and programs online. I have just been using Excel, which is maybe kind of old school, but even if they're paying by the page, I've kind of learned the hard way. In the past, I thought, oh, well, it doesn't matter. I don't need to keep track of my time. They're just paying by the page. But then when the project's over, I think, geez, it would be really nice to know how much time I spent on this to see if it was worth it. So going forward, even if I'm getting paid by the page, I'm definitely keeping track of my time, just so for my own knowledge. And just be in communication with the project editor on, what they're expecting, the rate, the copy editing rate that they're expecting, how fast you're going to be doing it, what level of editing it is. Just be really clear about their expectations. And, if it looks like it's going to take longer than they said, you need to talk to them about it, because, they can probably pay a little bit more or give you more time, or they could say, well, this is all we have. This is all the time and money we have. Just do your best. So just be really clear with them about things. just be willing to learn new skills, like some of the skills we already talked about, like the coding. If they offer you something that requires skills that you don't have yet, you could just say, well, haven't done that before, but I'd be totally willing to learn it. And also, when they email you to offer you a job, be really prompt. If they say, hey, we've got this project, would you like to take it? Try to get back to them as soon as you can. And you take your time to kind of see if it can fit in the schedule and if the pay is right for you. But try to get back to them at least within 24 hours, if not sooner, because they're trying to get things going with the project and they're trying to find an editor. And if you can't do it, they need to contact someone else. So they're always really appreciative when I get back to them really promptly. And then between jobs, just every once in a while, don't be a pest, but every once in a while, maybe every month or two, just check in with a project manager to say, hey, I really liked working with you. I really would enjoy working on some more projects. I'm available. It's good to kind of keep yourself on their radar, because you can go for a while between projects, but it's always good to let them know that you're available because they'll keep you in their mind. And also, when I was a project editor, I really liked getting holiday cards from my freelancers. It's kind of a little thing, but it was always fun to get a card in the mail. So I've been sending my clients New Year's cards. I feel like that's, it's non-denominational. And I'll just write them like a handwritten note that says, Dear John, thank you so much for the such and such project you sent me over the summer. I really enjoyed working on it with you. I hope we can work together in the new year or whatever. It's just like a little marketing thing that I think is good to do. And I think my last tip would just be to be really enthusiastic and cheerful about the work. If they send you a project, just say, thank you so much. I'm really excited to work on this. Or, whenever you turn in something, just say thank you so much for the opportunity, stuff like that, just so that they feel like you're excited about working with them and that you appreciate the work that they sent you. So I think that's about it. I hope that was helpful. I don't know if you guys have any other questions.
I think for me, actually, this is Pam. I'm a writer, and so I'm interested in more in the writing end. Do you have any suggestions on where to look for opportunities to work as an author on projects like this?
I actually am not that familiar with it, but I know I was just emailing with someone from EFA, and they were telling me about a Slack group, which I'm not super familiar with Slack, but I think it was called Writing for Educational Writers or something. So I know that there's that group out there, and I think I could send you an invitation for that. She sent me an invitation. I think I could send you an invitation, or at least send you information about that group. I'm sure that there are plenty of other groups out there.
Like you said, it's kind of just knowing where to get in and who knows who. So thank you. I do appreciate that.
And I'm sorry I don't have more information about it.
Sorry, this is Susie. One place that I know of is Learning Mate, and they're kind of you would kind of call them a packager for the writing side of things. And so you could check with Learning Mate, but I would say you could even just Google content creation textbooks. And also, if you go to publishers' websites, a lot of them will have in a tab or a link down at the bottom, like careers or something that they'll list what they're looking for at the time. So it might be freelance editing, or it might be, hey, we're looking for a content creator. And often they'll call them a subject matter expert. They're looking for somebody in this specific area. And so just going to publisher websites and looking for that and just Googling it to see what comes up.
Sounds good.
You could also try that on LinkedIn too.
Yeah.
Okay. And is there a guide to, I know for just commercial writing. There's Writer's Digest and, different sites that you can go to. Is there kind of an industry, well, I don't even know what it's called. Maybe a resource, or do you just kind of Google educational publishers and go through it that way, do you think? Or
I know that there are at least one group, I used to be a member, maybe I still am of this group, textbook authors on LinkedIn. And and I'm assuming that there are other groups like that where, it's just a group of people who do help write textbooks, and they have lots of great information in there. And so I would look for a group like that on LinkedIn, and I'm guessing there are also probably similar groups on Facebook where it's just that network, and people can give you ideas and give you the resources that they have found to be most helpful. So maybe somebody in there might have the definitive guide to go to.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Susie.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
any other questions?
Not for me. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we will wrap up. So I just want to thank everybody who joined on today. And just as a reminder, the recording will be up on our website about a week from now. And so if you want to review it, feel free to do that. And also, if you are interested in that list of book packagers, you can email us at info.ldspma@gmail.com, and we will send that to you. And a really big thanks to Scarlett for sharing all the information about textbooks, your experience, and best tips. Great. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we will end for today, and just stay tuned and look for an email for our topic of next roundtable. And again, if you have any suggestions, topics that you want to hear about, please email us, let us know. And hopefully we'll join on next month together. And also, if you haven't registered for LDS PMA's conference yet, which is the beginning of November, make sure to do that, because right now we're still running the special until the end of the month, where it's 50% off the regular registration fee. So huge deal there. So make sure to register if you haven't already. And we will talk with you later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.